Well, fresh from a win over the National Disability Insurance Scheme, the Prime Minister's picked a new fight with state premiers, telling them to lower electricity prices or else. Tony Abbott's accused the Prime Minister of hypocrisy because of the carbon tax's impact on power prices. But there's been a slight improvement in the polls for the government to greet Julia Gillard's return from a week's leave. Political correspondent Tom Miggleton has more from Canberra.
The Prime Minister says it's the new petrol price debate, skyrocketing power prices hurting households and businesses.
Meanwhile, some states, like New South Wales and Queensland, are doing very well out of this financially. For too long, some state governments have been increasing their revenue at the expense of the family electricity bill. That has to stop.
And she's telling state premiers if they won't stop willingly, she'll make them.
We won't lightly use the big stick of regulation of stronger powers for the energy regulator and the ACCC. But it's a stick we hold and which we will use if required.
She's got to be kidding. Seriously, Julia Gillard has got to be kidding.
But the New South Wales Energy Minister isn't seeing the funny side. The state government's power assets give $700 million a year to its budget bottom line.
If the Prime Minister wants the dividends reduced, then she can identify the hospitals and schools which should be cut.
But the state government is struggling to explain why it's taking a share of price increases for itself.
The New South Wales dividend system is related to the determinations which are set on the average weighted cost through the Australian Energy Regulator.
The dividends to government have gone up each year, though, haven't they?
The dividends, you've got the budget paper. Yeah.
So they have gone up, and that was after you had promised that they would be frozen.
No, no.
Households in New South Wales and South Australia have seen annual power bill increases of $250 a year over the last 4 years, with other states not far behind. The carbon tax will add an extra $170 to that in New South Wales, less in South Australia, but that sparked the opposition leader into action.
This is a Prime Minister who is now trying to blame the states for electricity price rises that are largely caused by her carbon tax.
Australia needed a carbon price. Australia did not need price increases of 50% or more for households over the last 4 years.
But the Coalition says the federal government's been setting national electricity prices for years, not state governments.
Frankly, it is gold medal hypocrisy for the Prime Minister to blame the states for price rises when every one of these price rises goes through a federal regulator.
With all due respect, the Prime Minister has the credibility of a cane toad. Cane toads have very little credibility in the West Australian public side.
Mrs. Prime Minister?
Whatever.
The Prime Minister even faced a grilling from visiting American comedian Will Ferrell.
I'm wondering, do you have an opinion on the power prices? Did someone already ask you about that?
Jokes aside, this is a potentially dangerous move for Julia Gillard because it refocuses attention on her unpopular carbon tax. But she outmanoeuvred state premiers in her last fight with them over the National Disability Insurance Scheme, a victory that appears to have paid off in the latest poll results. Newspoll has the government's primary vote up 5 points. Still bad, but the best result since February. The government would still get clobbered in an election despite a slight increase in the two-party preferred measure, but voters are still split on the question of better Prime Minister, with a quarter still undecided. A lowering of the official interest rate at today's Reserve Bank board meeting could have helped the Prime Minister win some of them over. The board decided to leave rates on hold. Tom Miggleton, Lateline.